All right, everyone, we'll get started. Welcome to the August 25th, 2022 BAR Small Meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slanbrook. The other board members present with me today are Fillmore Wilson, Bill Huey, and Julia Murray. City staff present today are Frankie Pinto, the BARS Administrator, and Isabella Gardner, Preservation Planner. For today's meeting will be as follows. We'll start with an introduction and overview of each project for the benefit of by staff, for the benefit of the board and the public. This will be followed by the applicant's presentation. Anyone speaking with the applicant during this time versus public comment, this includes owners, developers, architects, consultants, should speak during this time. If you're speaking, please state your name clearly for the record, first and last, and the applicant will be limited to a 10-minute presentation. By ordinance, the board can ask questions of the applicant at any time. By custom, we do so on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by public comment. Again, if you are speaking as a member of the public, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, and state your name clearly for the record, first and last. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. And then once the public and city have spoken, the applicant will have a period of 5 minutes to clarify or respond to anything raised in the public comment or during the city staff comment. At the close of the applicant's response period, the public comment and the applicant's presentation will be closed, and we'll move into board discussion and a vote. The following items are deferred: 79 Ashley Avenue and the policy statement for historic materials demolition purview. Please keep your comments to architecture only if you are speaking as a member of the public. This board does not have purview over livability or zoning concerns. Only architecture should be raised. That's it. I'll turn it over to Frankie for some meeting protocol.
Okay, information on each application, including documents submitted by the applicant and post-meeting results. Staff comments will be available online at charleston-sc.gov/BAR. To view or participate in the board meeting, you can stay in person or watch on YouTube. Written comments were submitted by 12 noon one business day before the meeting. Remember to include your name, address, phone number, meeting date, project number. Written comments are provided to the board 24 hours in advance of the meeting and will be acknowledged into the record and summarized. The applicants have been required to register and submit documents in advance of the meeting. Staff will control the slide presentation. That includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicant, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. All applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. Members of the public who wish to be heard during an agenda item shall announce their name and address for the record. I will also say for the board members and members of the audience. We are having trouble with the speakers in this room, so I'll ask everybody to speak loudly, but also into the microphones since this is being broadcast on YouTube. And if anyone in the back can't hear, please let us know so that we can remember to speak up. Board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yea in favor or nay not in favor. Chair shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if she has not reread the motion correctly.
Agenda item number 1 is approval of the minutes from the August 11th, 2022 meeting. Do I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. No opposed, motion passes. Okay, agenda item number, B1, 56 Congress Street. Frank, if you'll give us an introduction and overview, please.
56 Congress is requesting demolition of historic structures. Site visit was this morning at 8:30. This property was not surveyed in North Central circa 1920 in the historic materials demolition purview. This is the structure's location on Congress Street. Site photos. Text of Congress. And board map showing the history of the property. And we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Good afternoon, I'm LaShawn Key with Key Designs LLC. Going to present, we're requesting demo of 56 Congress Street. As you mentioned, it was built in the early 1920s. This is the site survey, and I'm sorry, demolition drawing. Please go to the next slide. This is the survey for the property, and one thing I want to note on the survey that I failed to mention this morning is that the property actually sits across the property line by about 9 inches or so. And that was also pointed out to us by the owner of the next door property, Ms. Alvina, who's here to speak about that later. Next slide, please. We already seen the Sanborn maps. Next slide. This is a exterior shot from Congress Street, and a couple of things I'm going to talk about specifically to the historic demo purview is the fact that from this view, there's really nothing historic about the house that is still there. The metal roof that's in the Google images was taken off approximately 8 to 10 years ago. The wood siding is no longer there. It's brick veneer. And there's just really nothing there. There's also no survey card for this property, so we feel that there's no, it's really not a good argument for it to remain here. There's nothing historical to tie it, to keep it. Could be your next slide, please. There's also, this is the west facade, just a brick. Next slide. And again, this is the rear property. A rear addition was put on, I believe it was approximately about 20 or so years ago. The rear, just really poor construction, is actually not structural sound. We do have a structural engineer's report detailing that. And next slide, please. This is just some of the damage, water damage from Vietnam. Next slide. More water damage and next slide. Slide. So these are just, you can periodically go through the slides. Basically, the roof as it is now is very unserviceable. Water damage all in the interior of the house as well as the exterior. So we feel that there's really no reason that the house should remain, as well as our structural report, as well as a lack of historical information other than it being built in the 1920s. We don't feel that there's no historical value to this home, and feel we should be able to demo it and build something new. What Ms. Alvina here, her neighbor who wants to, speak towards that a little bit.
Was the inspector that came to that house before this customer purchased the house. And he told me and another neighbor that the house was coming. He had a drone over it, he had all kind of lights on it underneath it, I have his phone number. And his card. We moved there next door in 1967, I was like 8, I'll be 64 soon. Actually, that back was put on, not 9 years, 4 to 5 years ago. Mr. Harris, who just passed away, it was his sister, passed down to his sister, and he and his wife was living there. And they had just a regular handyman that hung around. Listen to that going. Had the original owner, when he bricked his house out, he was a brick mason. So the brick around his house, and it ended up on our property. Underneath that house, I would say the boards are probably 120 years old. From what I remember, there was white chips of paint on there, and he was bricking it up. So the boards wasn't even painted; it had already faded out. So the house probably got termites. As far as the roof is concerned, I had the roof taken off, the tin roof, and his friend's son put that roof on about 4 years ago. And when the storm came, half of the shutters blew off. I watched them as they were putting it up. They were putting like one pack in each one. So the man came back and he redid it himself. And I have pictures. So not only do we have a hole in the living room, I have pictures of you for like to see it. It's a mess on the back. And like I said, underneath that brick, when I was like 13, when he was actually bricking it out, I was from 120 years ago. But it hasn't been changed since then because the brick is around it. I know the house has to be infested with termites. It needs to come down. And matter of fact, the two houses next to it, I am like on one side, the left side, and two houses at the end. They are brand new. You won't find a board over 5 years old on either one of those houses. They were rebuilt. The one at 54 and still have the roof that the city put on from its married original owner about 20 years ago. So the roof is about 20 years old that the city put on for us. But they redid that whole house. The house next to 52 Congress Street, they redid that whole house. You won't find an old board on those houses, those two houses. They redid them. Across the street, about 5 houses down, the 5th and 6th house is brand new. They redid it. The only thing they kept is the roof. Everything else is brand new, inside and out. So knowing that 2 brand new houses was rebuilt, 54, you're right next to 56, 54, and 52. I don't understand why that one can't be rebuilt, knowing that that house is no good. Like I said, I have an inspector. House is no good.
Do my board members have any questions for the applicant? Mr. Key, did you want to say something else?
No.
I just want to know the first floor elevation versus the flood zone of this house.
The flood elevation is 10, and the first floor, the floor elevation is 13.2.
And I think we just understood that your client just recently purchased the property, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. With us, it's not relevant, but the intention to build another house there, I assume, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right.
Just real quick, one of those photos, I just wanted to make sure that I was seeing that correctly. There's a photo you brought up with dead walls. That's it, yeah. Is that siding we're seeing there on the other side of the studs?
I am not 100% sure. Client sent me most of these pictures, and I haven't gotten in to confirm it. I do know that it could possibly, I'm not sure, that would be the west facade. The east facade is a gypsum type of sheathing, behind the boards that's ripped off, and if you go back a couple of pictures, you can kind of see that. Right there, that's what the white is hanging down, and then on the side of that, that black paper is actually the brick right there. So it's a hodgepodge of construction all around the house.
Mr. King? We move into public comment. Do we have anyone speaking to the public?
April Wood, Stuart Charleston Foundation. ACF has reviewed the application for the 56 Congress Street, and thank the applicant for reaching out in advance of the meeting. Although the house has been altered significantly over the years, the original form of the structure is readily apparent. Similar structures can be found next door and across the street. Removal of the structure would change the character of the street, and we recommend denial of the wholesale demolition of the house. And we would not be opposed to the demolition of the brick veneer, the existing rear addition, and the other elements that have been added over the years. With proper treatment, this house could be returned to a Hudson building that contributes to the character of the block.
And Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society had the opportunity to visit the site this morning. I'd like to thank Mr. Key for answering our questions and walking us through. We are in the same campus as Stuart Charleston Foundation and not supporting this request. While we recognize this building has been altered, it retains its original form, which is highly characteristic of the rhythm of this section of Congress Street and important to preserve. I think also encouraging that the structural report provides specific feasible repair recommendations outlining a clear path to rehabilitation. Given the level of alterations, to Stuart Charleston Foundation's point, we feel there is room for creativity in approaching rehabilitation of this building. And we would just ask that the board take this into consideration and just request that these options may be explored.
One more thing. You'll have a period during the response. Well, you're the next door neighbor, right?
Yes.
Yes, you can go and speak. And could you repeat your name?
Alvina Lofton. When I went down to the board to have my house painted like 5 years ago, they told me I didn't need a permit because the house is on the borderline of the historic area. It's not in the historic area, it's in the borderline, you know? So they said I didn't need a permit. They said I could do almost anything I want to do, but if it was something serious such as we want to rebuild, then yes, I would need a permit. But it's actually not in the historic area from what they told me. It's on the borderline of it. So they told me I didn't even need a permit, but I told them I would like to have it, so I wouldn't have any problems. So they gave it 3-1 and I didn't have to pay for it.
Just so you know, this house is now in what we call the historic materials demolition purview. So it is under the BAR purview if you're removing structures or features that are 50 years old or older. But BAR has only had purview there since about 2018. So if you're painting or something like that, we don't look at it. But you typically do need a permit to paint. I don't know why they wouldn't have told you that.
They told me I didn't need one, but they gave me one for free because I wanted to have one.
But yeah, we wouldn't look at that. We would only look if you're removing historic materials for features.
Well, there are 4 houses there that was completely built over. From, like I said, it's right next door from that house. So I don't understand. This was recently, within the last 3 years.
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? And again, a decision has not been made yet. We're hearing from the public, we're hearing from staff, and the ultimate decision will be made by the board, just for procedural purposes. Anyone else from the public? All right, Frank, you can give us these staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff's observations, the adjacent 58 Congress is your house, which has not been altered to the same extent as this property. The brick on the east facade of this property does not match that on the south or west. I think that was discussed this morning. With the vinyl is less than 50 years old, so it is actually not under our purview to review. They can demolish that without our review. Staff comment, while the siding has been changed to brick, the overall form of the structure has been retained. A exploratory demo could determine if wood siding remains under the brick veneer and to what extent. Staff recommends following the repairs mentioned in the structural report to restore the building. And per our policy, our ordinance for this area, demolition refers to the removal of an entire structure or a substantial portion of a structure visible from the public right-of-way, or a substantial portion of features of a structure that are visible from the public right-of-way that define its historic architectural character. Staff believes that the demolition of this structure would compromise the character of the neighborhood and change the overall historic landscape of the area. So staff recommends.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. Key, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or the city recommendation?
Just the fact that, as I understand the demo, the historic demo purview is as it's seen from the street, and the structure, overall structural form of the building has been modified, so it doesn't retain its historic character. Again, the brick, the roof, and the fact that it does not have a survey card for it does say that the historic nature of the building, it wasn't recognized, I guess, when it was done. I believe it was 2008 or four, right? That it wasn't seen as a significant enough building to have a survey card for. While it does have historic character in the structure, in history, we feel that the context also of the neighborhood, if you look down the streets, I had it in slides, that there's houses of all different shapes and forms that have been renovated through the years. So the character of that end of the street has changed significantly. There's only 5 houses, 6 houses that are 1-story. The remaining structures are actually 2-story homes. So the character has changed in that community. We feel that the character has changed, so the historic value is really not there due to the shape and what has already happened to the building. Thank you.
All right, public comment on the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Well, I guess I'll start. I think I saw this morning at the site. I did see evidence of siding behind some of the brick. You could see that the window. I think we looked at that together. And then I'm pretty certain that photo, we weren't able to get inside, but I'm pretty certain that photo was showing siding on the back side of the stud. And I believe actually, this lady, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, the neighbor. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was standing in the door, a neighbor came over, and I was standing in the door when y'all was over there.
Oh, okay.
I think it was a 2-view I waved at, not a 2-view I waved at.
I believe you had said, in the recollection when you were young, you seen Mr. Mack putting brick right over the wood that was
Oh,
not
yeah.
painted. So
Yes,
that's kind of what we saw too.
yes.
And also, the photo in the attic, that's definitely the original structure there. Knob and tube wiring is shown installed on that, and that framing is totally 1920. So as far as the structure itself and the integrity of the form of that structure, original stuff. And so I know in the past we've had applications that were of similar nature to this. matter of consistency, we talked about the form and the context of the form, the streetscape. And I think base of that. So when actually April from Historic Charleston read her comments, I'm back agreement with that and too. The form is original, and therefore I believe the backside of the fact that this has been ripped over is the fact that in some sense it might have been preserved in a way. It's kind of like vinyl siding, which we all not big fans of, but the one good thing vinyl siding does is it kind of preserves the.
No, I don't even think he had a permit.
Well, that's on me. But I would be more in agreement with staff's recommendation, mainly because of potential loss of the form, the historic form, which is pristine, and the structure, which is under there.
I am in line with Bill in the photograph he is referring to. I have floated it up on the inside, and the original framing is there. What I can see of it looks reasonably sound. On that wall, it appears that the original siding is still there, even though it is in relatively bad condition, and felt was put over it with the brick. And the roof framing certainly looks original. I think the basic house stands a little addition on the back is in there underneath the brick veneer. The form is there. Within a block of this house, there are 9 houses with very similar form, 1 story. A number of them had little cut-in front porches, some of which have been infilled. But this form is prevalent in that part of town and is very prevalent within a block of this house. So I counted 9 single-story houses with this basic form. The other form is a 2-story house it's on the same block, and there's several of them. I think originally most of them probably had double front porches. A lot of the porches have been infilled, and a number of these houses have been fairly successfully restored, retaining their form and the restored character of their house. Staff.
I've been having a hard time with this one, and I was actually having a harder time when I thought that the metal roof was still there, but realizing now that that was taken off, presumably before the definition of demolition changed. I just look at it as our purview is what is visible from the street, not,
Yes.
not what is in the attic. So to me, what I would be concerned about is the form. I do recognize that. It's a nebulous concept, but I recognize granted it is on the street. Like Miss Lofton's house has been taken much better care of, and it's adorable. Everybody agrees that. But to me, when I look at it from the street, I see a chimney and a little bit of roof. And other than that, I mean, form, just an ethereal concept. And we have no leverage to control what someone might do or anything else. I really am struggling with the extent of our purview and the quality of what.
Yeah, I'm in line with you. I'm really struggling with this one. And I think the site visit was important this morning, especially because it was clear that the brick is not original, that porch is not original, the windows are not original, the door is not original. Clearly, we don't have purview of the back, so that. But then finding out that the roof was also not original, I hear Bill and Elmore's arguments, and I won't claim to know how much salvageable from the framing, but I think it hinges on the form, but it's just the form. I'm not sure that, I don't know how far our purview extends to just maintain the form. There's nothing left.
And to be honest, Julie is absolutely correct. We do not have purview over what's on the inside. Whether there's original framing there or not, it's not visible, and so we certainly do have that to but form is consistent in the neighborhood, and I think there's value to that. Maintaining the scale of the streetscape. And so demolishing these little structures, and there, and I'm sure you can walk around those neighborhoods and you'll find another very similar house that has vinyl siding, and maybe the chimney's gone, but certainly the old turn roof is gone and it's got asphalt shingles on it. And so is that one eligible for demolition? Because the wood siding is very eligible. Is it eligible to be saved because it is an appropriate form? That's what I struggle. I agree with you, Julie, in the sense that there's not much see on that house that's original except for the chimney and the form.
And, looking at the Sanborn house, I'm sure it was a beautiful street with a lot of continuity of form and, the demolition of this house happens.
I agree with you. I think this is there are a lot of one-story houses on the street and in the area, and you can tell that this was the architectural character of the neighborhood. But I am struggling because I'm just looking at this one structure and yes, it's the sister house right next door,
And actually, we have a long, sorry.
Yeah, and from what you went, I would absolutely take it on a case by case basis. Justice to a great extent, but in my estimation, this is clear the door in my.
heating this from the church that we looked at, where the bricks are in the exterior, we can tell that the form was there because the eaves, the overhangs, we can tell that they had built over the siding that the church used to be.
There's more visible fabric there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure. I mean, this little house has exposed rafter tails, and the rafter tails are the rafter tails are the rafters, and the rafter tails are visible in places because some of it's because of deterioration. So from the outside, I can see that the roof form still exists.
Yeah, I think we're heading to a strange place here, but I'm gonna make a motion for approval of the request.
There's a motion on the floor for approval. Do I have a second? I typically don't.
But I think you can.
I can't. Very rare scenario where I put it to a vote. Fillmore,
Nay, not in favor.
Bill,
May I vote?
Julia, and chair votes in favor, and the motion failed. So that's a deferral until we have
Question for the chair. Opportunity. I make a motion. Opposite direction. It is the five. Correct.
Yes.
So we're just, submittal until full board or not.
Well, until full board.
Or full
That sounds good. That sounds good. All right, we have a motion on the floor for a deferral until the full board is present. Do I have a second? Do a vote? Bill? Omar?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia? And Pedro. Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Do you have any questions?
So the Furbies, I will have to resubmit for the next board or?
You would not have to resubmit. We could just carry you on to the next meeting.
Okay,
So you wouldn't have to do anything additional other than attend the meeting. There would be no additional fee for that.
okay.
Because in this case, the fault was ours for not having a full board.
And frankly, if, I mean, we typically have a full board meeting, so just minus one person, but, we would wait until we had a full board. So at the next meeting, for example, if there would only be the same board, then I think Frankie would hold it until the next meeting. We do not have to
have an alternate.
Right, yes. Makes sense. So no decision was made.
Right. Right, so I'll just be in contact and see when the next full board is.
Yes, and I can make sure, I can contact our alternates if anyone is absent to make sure that we have an odd number of board members.
So will we have another, I'm sorry, will there be another site visit?
I don't think
Because I don't know if it's the other person wasn't there.
I can
so-
coordinate with the other board member to make sure that they can go out to the site. But it wouldn't be a full board, so you wouldn't have to be present.
Oh, no, I don't want to, I don't mind.
Well, then I can have the other board member coordinate with you to meet on site.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 2, 71 Moultrie Street. Thank you for the introduction overview, please.
There's 71 Moultrie Street, requesting demolition of a portion of the historic structure. I visited this morning at 8:50 a.m. The structure is a category 4 in Hampton Park Terrace, circa 1920, in historic material demolition purview. On Moultrie Street, the existing site photos. Some context of Moultrie. Next photo provided by Kevin Everly. This house here, in the goalpost, is the house we're discussing, and this is circa 1922. That I will turn it over to the applicant.
Joseph Rubenstein with Dunright Construction. Presenting that, so yeah, we are proposing to do a renovation and addition to the rear of the property. we're looking at. Talking to that 1920 Soto. That was, can you actually pull that back up? I didn't get a chance to see that real well.
I can also send you a copy if you'd like it.
That would be wonderful, thank you. So in that one, it still does look like it is the way it is now, if I'm not mistaken, as far as kind of fill.
The front porch studs.
Yeah, okay. All right, so that's what we were trying to figure out. We couldn't tell if that was original or not. So,
And I will apologize to you, Mr. Everly provided it to me a couple of days ago, and I didn't think to send it to you.
no problem at all, and I'm sure you're good this morning. I apologize. We get a water line at 8 a.m. this morning, so I was preoccupied. I apologize. Okay, so we were proposing to on over on the second story, kind of make things a little more symmetrical. There was a bump out, it looks like at one point it's all the framing and that corner sticks out about 1 foot further than the rest of the house, so at that or not, so we are proposing to keep all those front 4 windows there with the very this is we're going to restore them. Others we have 6 or 8 that are just in really bad shape. We're going to replace them with light con. Everything provided light. The others we will repair as needed. Addition on the rear will have their stuff there. We'd like to replace the 4 front doors.
You mentioned the front doors, they're not shown that way on your, on the middle drawings, right? They're showing us the existing.
No, I had some information there on doors.
I mean, there was a like cut sheet for one light over one panel door, but then on the drawings themselves, I think the existing doors to remain. I just want to make sure I'm clear on what.
And I overlooked that. Correct, yes, ma'am. Just the customer asked for it to update it. You know, something to start on your end, we could look at. We would like to do it regardless, just because it's renovation, but we need to stay a little more in line. You know, that's something we can discuss for sure.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Demolition drawing, the plan is, there's the, on the east side, there's the little jut in toward the back. And so the idea was to remove from that point back, and then in that same plane to build a new addition.
Correct, and with the architect and engineer, it will be that section that's taken off, we go back identical. We just thought it would be significantly construction point. Off the wall, you know, foundation level, so we just, at that point, we just thought it would be clean to start there.
I think at first, I'm not sure, but I think the sandboard is a little hard to see. think that is part of the original building.
Right, yes, sir, I think so as well.
One more quick question, the so-called bump out on the northwest corner, you said it's new framing in there,
It is,
so you intend to keep that?
yeah, but nobody didn't put in there to change it, so. No, nobody would complain if you wanted it gone, I don't think.
It looks like on the side of it's going to two windows. Put our hands on it, but it does look the same as the rest of the 2/2s
Right.
on the east and west side of the structure. So it's kind of weird.
Any other questions for the applicant? Approved at this time. Is there anyone speaking from the public? Kevin?
Sorry, trapped.
Kevin, you didn't mean to make an
Yeah.
obstacle for you.
Oh my God, it's all maze.
Thank you very much. My name is Kevin Eberly. I live around the corner on President Street. I'm an officer with President Community Hingham Park Terrace Neighborhood Association as well. Although the owner and the applicant never approached us to discuss the matter, so myself. And I'm wholesale opposed to the application on various components. First, for the window. I'm not, despite what people may say, a crazy person, and would not be opposed to selective repair and removal of some of the sashes, but plans that I looked at, and I think are the same, about exactly what was even being proposed, which windows are to stay, which are to go. I would not oppose having the staff meet with the applicant and do a selective removal. But hopefully, many of those windows could be repaired, at least from the ground this morning. Many of them looked like they were possibly repairable. And the adjacent house at 67 Moultrie, several years ago, when it was being restored, the applicant, or the owner, yes, had begun the actual removal of the windows on the west and the south side of that building. And Dennis, the former city architect, had been contacted, had a stop work order put on the windows, which are also 2/2. Heard the same argument about bad condition, and the windows there all had to be removed on the west and south side and replaced with exact matched custom windows. The ones that were still intact on the north and the west sides were ordered to be preserved. The doors, I don't know what to say. There wasn't even really an argument about why they should be removed, except personal preference, which is, I don't believe, ever been used as a reason to remove historic fabric by the board. There's nothing indicating any problem with doors at all. As far as the back of the building, it's very clearly visible from Rutledge Avenue. The original footprint shows, and you can see this on the 1929 Sanborns and every Sanborn since, the original the original footprint is everything other than that stair porch on the back. The plans indicate, I don't know what the basis for this was, that everything from that little tuck-in point is an addition, a later addition. I'm not sure what the source for that belief is. It's belied by the Sanborn map. So I would be opposed to the removal of that addition, that section, which is not an addition. Really, frankly, just as a defensive mechanism, you hate to see sort of this long eel type construction. In no other area would a addition that by total length is going to overwhelm the original house. It's not only not subordinate, it predominates. sides over the house. It's so long. I'm not sure why on such a large lot, a separate building is not being considered instead or something, but totally opposed to that. I'm also disappointed that the owner is not pursuing more vigorous opportunity to do wholesale restoration of the house. For example, and I've had these this morning, I was friends with the previous owners who owned it like in 2003 and went over and took photos of the house showing that all of the porch columns, for example, were round. The Murphys were the ones who removed those round columns that I have a picture of, if the applicant's interested in seeing this, and replaced them with those square posts instead. So it would be an actual opportunity to better restore the house. And lastly, as far as the changes to the front porch otherwise, I wasn't even aware that that was part of the application. It's not referred to anywhere in the paper, so I'm totally opposed to that. So.
Anyone else speaking from the public?
We had the opportunity to visit the site this morning, and while we are encouraged by this application to address deferred maintenance issues, to Mr. Everly's point, we do feel a little bit more clarification is needed to better understand the extent of the proposed window replacement. It sounds like there is a preservation ethic there, so that's encouraging, but we would just ask for more clarity there. Historic elements should be retained and repaired to the greatest extent possible. Specifically, the decorative windows on the front elevation should be preserved features, and we also did want to point out that the condition of the second story porch appeared to have always been a two-bay porch rather than three. Retaining that, even though that's like the board's purview, I just wanted to throw that out there. Secondly, while we acknowledge that there is certainly room for improvement at the rear of the property, it appears that the majority of the existing footprint is original based on the Sanborn maps and the consistency of the design and material. So we would ask that the new addition, if it is to be constructed, be integrated more sensitively with the existing.
Anyone else speaking from the public? Frankie, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Okay, staff observations, we believe the rear porch and the stair to be added approximately 1970, 1981. The existing rear addition is minimally visible street, but as we found this morning, it is visible from Rutledge and Union Street. Staff comments, while the enclosed portion of the house is original, staff would not object to the rear porch or stair being removed or in addition. The windows and door on the front facade should be retained and repaired. And the unusual configuration of the front porch with the one single bay and two stacked bays appears to be original and is a defining feature of the house. Staff recommendation is denial of staff comments.
Frankie, Ms. Rubenstein, did you want to respond to anything raised in the public comment and city staff comments and recommendations?
I apologize if there was a little lack of information on the windows. But yes, we definitely want to preserve the ones that we can. I do think there's about 6 of them that need to be replaced with like comments like the rest. So that is for sure. As far as reading your comments and hearing that, it sounds to me like bigger issues.
We would not have purview over the addition, just the part being removed.
Right, I got you, okay. All right, so that's, knowing that now, if we resubmit, if we get to that point, we'll. So, thank you.
All right, Public comment on the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Question. For staff. That is the front porch. Is there any demolition considered?
Any extension?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little.
It's sort of a gray area. Technically, we would be demolishing the form of the roof over the front door. I guess it would be up to you, all of you, to decide if you think that form is important to retain.
And there's also the form of 2 bays versus.
Right, there is the form of
2 bay versus.
2 bays on the second floor and 3 bays on the first floor, which, thank you to Kevin, we found was original to the house.
So, it would have, for example, porch, front porch. As in the original part of the rear of the house that was supposed to be demolished. I certainly think we would be wise to do the, I would not support this without somehow staff and understanding that windows, your understanding that windows that could be preserved would be windows that could not be replaced in kind. Support the demolition of the original back porch section of the house. And if we have purview on the alterations, the demolition of the roof form of the second story.
Make sure that I'm on the same page with everybody else here and just explain to the applicant. I think this is the kind of parent's understanding that that is not a previous addition.
Right,
but this is actually part of the original plan.
correct, and just support.
And then in terms of visibility, it's not easy to see from Rutledge because of trees, but trees don't count. So it really is visible from Rutledge. It seems like there's plenty of in-kind replacement that's truly warranted. It'd be great if it were clearer and that knew exactly what moved and replaced in kind. And to consider if they are going to extend out the back to incorporate some techniques like high-bend or, add words to indicate where old meets new. Front doors are in good condition and historic, if not original. And it's also sad that the fireplaces are going away.
Definitely agree with Steph's comment about the 1970. Definitely could be removed. Seeing now the follow-up with the Sanborns dictating the footprint of the original form of the building, staff also have retention of that original area in the back and also retention of the original I believe the applicant said that he'd be willing to provide a survey to staff. I'm encouraged by that. Really, maybe any other particular details or items that you might itemize as compromised in some way that might be Say that I'm your staff's comments, yeah, and to that point.
I agree with my fellow board members, I don't have really anything to add. When you say the odd roof form, do you mean that little pop out in the side?
The cover of the front door.
Cover over the front door.
Okay. Oh, and that's what, that would get into Sam's comments, maintain the roof. I don't have anything to add. I'm in agreement.
Or partial demolition, because that's not in our purview, or is it the 1970 stuff? If it's 1970, I guess it is, right? We would still have to approve it. Okay. Partial demolition of the 1970s and steps. And a board condition to clarify which windows, which historic windows warrant replacement. New staff comments, one. You make the door, plural doors. And 3.
Of remaining demolition. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for approval, partial demolition of the 1970s rear porch.
That can be construed as partial demolition of the 1970s. What we're saying is removal of the 1970s.
Approval of demolition of the 1970s rear porch and steps. A board condition to specify which historic windows warrant replacement kind, with staff comments 1, 2, and 3, and denial of the remaining. Do we have a second? Bill?
Yeah.
Julia?
Yay.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Rubenstein. All right, agenda item number 3 is 559 Rutledge Avenue. Frank, if you'll give us an introduction and overview when you're ready.
Um, 559 Rutledge is closure of Sorour Piazza, site visit this morning at 9:10 a.m. Circa 1890 in the Historic Corridor District. Is the location on Rutledge. Okay, existing site photo. Some context of Rutledge. Showing the history of the site.
So ultimately what the homeowner is trying to achieve here is they want to enclose what was converted into a deck above a kitchen area. Is this, oh, hey, I'm Paul. Okay, I'm the designer.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I might clarify, I think that the historic piazza classification for this area is
probably inaccurate. The kitchen area that resides underneath it has a hydrostop roof that was added, and this porch structure appears to have been added at the time of the kitchen was. It's not original to the house itself, that portion. If you look at the Sanborn map, you'll see, if you look at the existing house, you'll notice that originally there was some sort of porch or something on that side of the house. At some point in its history, it appears that they added in a room that is now the kitchen area. And the time they did that, they put a porch over the top of it, hydrostopped it, and then made a small walkout from an upstairs bedroom to create sort of a back porch thing. They used these materials that are historic. They did the windows with historic windows. The construction is consistent with the exception of the hydrostop with a historic appearance. But I would argue the point that this isn't necessarily a historic piece of architecture in terms of how this was constructed. It emulates appearances of historic architecture, but it was clearly something that was later constructed. So what we're trying to do is just create the homeowner's objective of having a little bit more space for their living. And then at the same time, I think that this architecturally sort of rounds out the house a little bit better. Sorry, a little bit better, but again, so I think that's really about all I have to say about it. I think that the pictures and looking at it.
When do you think, Mr. Hunt, do you think that this was added? You said that.
I think realistically, if I had to take a stab at it, I'd say sometime in the late 70s to mid 80s would be about the time that construction was probably done in that neck of the woods based on what I've seen. But again, that's speculative without cutting open walls and looking at the timber and assessing construction.
Randy, do you have?
All we have is the sandboards that show a set-in porch.
Yeah, that's not the kitchen.
Well, that's the two-story porch.
Yeah, it was. At one point in time, there was a two-story porch on the back of the structure, and it was added. I don't know when it was done. That's what I'm trying to say is, so there. No, you looked at it this morning, right? You saw the bump out for where that kitchen was added on the lower level. So they closed in and extended. So the roof is original. That roof line over the back addition, that's the original roof line. That's why it doesn't go all the way over the porch. I think there's a picture on one of the pages that I gave you in the drawings that shows you the porch from the standing on it view. Yeah. So you can see the hydrostop deck and railings, and that's from the kitchen from underneath that was added when it was added. And then that roof line above that, I believe, may be the original roof line.
Any other questions? Anyone speaking for the public?
People would start Wilson Foundation, start Wilson Foundation and to review the application. We close the remainder of the Viewing Historic Piazza at 559. Piazzas are the primary character defining features of Charleston's historic building. Unfortunately, 559 Rutledge Avenue has been altered. Configuration of the building. We believe it is even more important to protect what remains.
I'm Cheryl with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We're also not supportive of this request in accordance with the AR policy statement on piazza enclosures, emphasizes the importance of preserving the Charleston's vernacular architecture. And based on Sanborn maps, it does appear that this portion of the porch is original to the house. Wilson Foundation said about the importance of maintaining legibility of this feature by preserving what's left. Thank you.
Anyone else speaking from the public? If you'll give us the staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff's only comment was that this was the only remaining of that, and we believe it should be retained. Therefore, we're recommending
Mr. Kime, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the city staff comments or?
No, I mean, I think it's a pretty cut and dry situation, just general. I'm sure you probably see about 800 designers and contractors who are tasked by the homeowners to try to achieve an objective that's important to them. I think it's minimally visible from the street, and I think that the character's been pretty drastically altered from what the original feel of a two-story piazza is for Charleston. But
Okay, public comment, the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and a vote.
Yes, there's no question, it's been changed a lot of times. On the photographs, it's a little tell, because that's all we have. I think that the roof of the existing fort is original, the columns are probably new. Placed, I think the roof is probably original, so that roof form, and the line of columns, even the columns have been replaced. This, that form and the roof, I think, and the ceiling, probably original. When I look at the element, drawing, it certainly takes away any suggestion that was ever reported there. There's no the porch enclosure wall is been playing its co-player. For the wall below, there's no indication that it's been added or changed. So it doesn't give really any the original form of the porch. Distressing.
And for this area, we wouldn't actually be looking at what is built. We would simply be looking at it as demolition of the piazza, just for clarity.
There's metal. I know that this has filter, but I think that there's
No, since we left it in tonight, it's been original form and
I would make a motion.
Julia? Fillmore?
Yea in favor.
Bill? Chair votes as majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Kine.
thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 4 is 8 Lawrence Street. Frankie, do you have an introduction, please?
8 Lawrence is requesting after the fact approval for the removal of metal roof and removal of 6 over 6 wood windows. Removing shutters and removal of chimney and the structure is not rated on the west side, circa 1930, in the historic materials demolition and curbing. This is the structure location on Lawrence. The existing site, or previous existing site, in the context of Lawrence, and I believe they visit in February when we demolition of some rear portions. And this is the 1944 and 55 Sanborn map showing the structure. I got the applicant's previous presentation in here. If you want to go ahead and come up, I'm not sure if you want to talk about previous presentation, or we do have some photos for the existing site. So I can pull those up if you like.
And that's fine, I just, deadline to get everything in, so I missed. Good afternoon, my name is Marty Gunner, I'm the owner of 8 Lawrence Street. I want to first say thank you for your time this afternoon, and apologize for my miscommunication and lack of knowledge of the processes going through once we started finding damage inside the home as we were doing the work. The first item I would like to talk about is the roofing portion of the project. As we were going through, we found a lot of damage in the roof, and along the entire perimeter of the roof, we had to cut the roof back 18 inches to 24 inches and replace all of the roof sheeting damage. So there's all new roof sheeting, 18 to 20 inches, all the way around the perimeter on the outside edges of the roof due to rot. And what we were wanting to replace it with is a standing seam metal roof. We wanted it to be black in color. And I much would have rather have gone ahead and done a silicone coating over the roof, and if we could have patched it and done it that way. But with the amount of damage that we're finding and vines growing up and going through the panels and everything, allowing the water in, we at the time just to try to mitigate the damage as quickly as possible, shut it off, put ice and water, high temp to the top of the roof. The wood windows on the home, after we had our meeting in February, we were going to try to save the 3 windows on the front of the home and try to get it so that we could retain the wood windows there. But as we were going through and doing the work, we found a lot of substantial termite damage, water damage around all the windows, the jambs. All of the windows and doors have had to be reframed with the headers, the studs beside the windows, the jambs, and the sills around the windows because of the termite damage and water damage. And at that time, we were like, well, we just went around, looked around the neighborhood and saw that predominantly everybody had 1-over-1 windows, so that's what made our decision in going that way with the windows. The shutters, we're planning on putting wood shutters back up. We just have them down right now for when we were doing the construction. But we're going to go back, not with the original shutter, but we're going to do wood shutters to match the sizes of the window. Then the other ones, the little louver pieces were all falling apart and everything. We're going to have new wood shutters. And the last issue on here was about the chimney, and back in the February meeting, it was brought up, I think, by Mr. Wilson asking about the chimney. And I explained that as we were taking the paneling down on the inside of the house, that everything had just was collapsing down inside the fireplace. The whole fireplace was filled with brick and debris. And as we kept digging it out, more stuff just kept falling in. So safety reasons, we just went ahead and removed that chimney entirely. All of that.
Do I call board member questions for the applicant?
Okay, the new windows, were the openings resized for the new windows, or?
On the front, they're real close. They had to be resized a little bit.
Any other questions? All right. Comments? Do you have anyone speaking from the public?
Charleston, the Preservation Society had the opportunity to stop by the site this morning. I had the opportunity to see the site back in February, last time this was before the board, and quite frankly, we are shocked and very disappointed by the extent that the project was last before the board. At the most recent meeting, it was exceedingly clear that the board denied wholesale removal of the historic metal roof and the original 6/6 windows. While the submittal provided very limited information, as I said, we had the opportunity to visit the site and we asked that inappropriate replacement materials such as the ill-proportioned 1/1 windows be replaced to match other notable elements such as the location of the front door and the configuration of the porch should also be restored. We ask that the board deny this after the fact request and the applicant work with staff to reverse these incident changes. April Wood, Charleston Huntington, HCL 3 the request for the applicant was given clear direction to and should have reached out to the city staff for a reconsideration.
So the chimneys should be restored to match the previous state, and that the windows should be replacement if the previous windows are no longer available. Staff recommendation is denial per the previous board motion.
Want to respond to anything raised in the public comment with city staff comments and recommendations?
Yeah. With the windows, in everything that we talked about, I'm completely willing to come back and work with the staff and get through all these items the way they need correctly. And with the windows, I know the previous meeting we were talking about trying to save the 3 for the front so that the front facade of the house would look appropriate. And I'm willing to go out and try to find some wood windows of the appropriate size to what was there so that we can put on that front face of the house. So I just wanted to say that I'm willing to work with the staff and get it needed.
Thank you. Public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
Quick question on staff, so regarding the roof.
That was my question. What about the roof?
Oh, sorry, thought I had that in the comment with the chimney, but if the roof has been removed, so they have replaced it in kind already, then it's been replaced in kind. Yeah.
I don't think it has yet.
Not yet, I thought it had.
The roof requires to.
It is not finished.
Yeah.
Then it should be replaced in kind, I'm sorry.
I was not here for this. What you guys reviewed and what you decided at that time, because it seems like a pretty egregious case of, seems like, yeah, I completely agree with the preservation groups. That it all the direction was given and not followed.
I will not. You know that.
West side.
We are preservation group, and unfortunately, I wasn't at the site visit in February when we being out of town. Of all the Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. No, I will read the public comment into the record now. Horvath at 6 Lawrence Street. Hello, I would like to submit comment construction at 8 Lawrence Street, Charleston, South Carolina, which is item number 4 on the VARS agenda for August 25th, 2022. My name is Chase Horvath. I own 6 Lawrence Street, the property directly south of 8 Lawrence Street. To start, I'm very happy that this home is getting restored. The few times I've met the people working on it have been very friendly and communicative. I do have concerns with adding bedrooms and leaks to the home, parking, sunlight, and water drainage. My core concerns with the additional before construction, I had nice natural light coming in the bedroom window on the north side of the house. The additional length added on now makes that windows look at a wall. I'm only questioning it because it doesn't have to do with the demolition. If you take a look through it, if there's any comment with respect to the demolition, which is the happy this project is underway and support our efforts to restore what is a really cool old house. And so at this time, I'll give the applicant, if you wanted to respond to this comment, although.
Your concern, I think, was that we had a small addition of 10 feet added on the back of the home, and that originally it was a 3-unit property. Zoning told us that we do not have 3 units, so we said, okay, it's going to be a single family. And so there's actually the same amount of rooms and bedrooms that would have been, that we wouldn't have been able to keep it as 3. And there's a little shed in the back that he referenced to, just be a storage shed in that.
Thank you, Mr. Gunter. And just so you know that we don't have purview over what addition you're putting on. The city does obviously from a permitting perspective. So that's why I didn't read the whole comment. Okay, now we are back in board discussion.
I just want to reach my question, so versus the original. I want to make a comment about reconfiguring administration and locations as well. I believe that was
I'm trying to remember what is discussed last time, or if we.
we have to tell us if any of the existing there have been, has anything been shuffled, removed, or
On the front side of the home, there was an additional door that went to the upstairs unit that we have done away with because it's not a 3-unit complex anymore. So we did away with that door.
And I do believe that was.
previously? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Do you think looking at the original photos? The windows on the front, I don't know about the side. Windows on the front, I think are the photographs. two things that happened at once. Two, I think, going in front of this. The roof. We could just say, define what should be a standing seam metal roof with a handprint ridge. So that's
Chimney,
Gotta make a motion for voting. Staff comments and board comments. Shutters are to be replaced. And the original window sizes and locations are to be restored. And original 6/6 windows.
Motion on the floor for denial with staff comments and board comments, the roof and shutters are to be replaced in 6/6 windows, as well as the location are to be restored. Location and size. For 6 windows, the location and size are to be restored. Do I have a second?
Sorry. You didn't say 6/6. Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry.
I had left out the size, but the configuration, 6/6.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. To a vote, Fillmore,
yea in favor.
Julia. In favor. Chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gunter. Item number 5, 155 Trad Street. I think whenever you are ready, you can give us an introduction and overview of the project, please.
Trad is requesting conceptual approval for a partial enclosure at rear of Piazza. It is a circa 1900 in the old and historic district. Location, corner of Trad and Limehouse. Existing site photo. Some context. Here's the house on Sanborn, Mass.
David Foster, Charleston's Construction Services. We were proposing to close part of the piazza over the sitting room on the right-hand side of the property. This slide shows existing conditions. That's the sitting room below the area that we're trying to do this enclosure for a bathroom and laundry room. Next slide. This is front elevation. Opposite side of the piazza. There's a roof section. Shows the roof is over the piazza. Slide. That is the proposed addition over the sitting room in the back half of the piazza. The laundry room, bathroom. Slide. Commission. Pictures from the street, front here. That's it.
What about board members have any questions for the applicant? Do we have anyone speaking from the public?
April Wood, Hudson Foundation, I see has reviewed the application. Plazas are building feature unique to and closely character of the city that should be preserved to and happy to hear. Now, the second story piazza is particularly special as it is still completely intact with full visibility from
Could you give us city staff comments and recommendations, please?
Your policy statement on piazza enclosures. Enclosing piazzas in whole or in part may result in irreversible damage to our architectural heritage. Necessity for the additional area which results from the enclosure must be sufficiently compelling and extreme that other alternative could reasonably accomplish. Photographs that any other alternative solution shall result in unacceptable alterations to the historic fabric of the structure, and location of the piazza enclosure shall be to the rear of the piazza, minimal in size, and not alter the conceptual relationship between the house and the piazza. For the piazzas in the first floor enclosure, making the structure appear unbalanced and top-heavy. If the piazza is to be enclosed, it should include no more than one bay, similar to the previous enclosure. The proposed location for the new enclosure will cause the removal of an existing shutter on the windows. Any enclosure should join the wall of the existing house in between windows so that the shutters are not impacted. Transom windows are inappropriate for this location per our policy. Windows should have vertical proportions. If piazza is enclosed, any new windows should follow the pattern of the existing house. So on the north elevation should be centered in the piazza. It should be more vertical than horizontal with a 6/6 or similar light pattern. And new those areas should sit within the existing columns and balustrades so that these features can remain in place. And that being said, staff recommendation is denial of enclosure.
Frankie, Mr. Walters, do you want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or city staff comments or recommendations?
We would be in agreement with matching the enclosure and sitting downstairs uniformly, using the existing windows, and doing away with those trans.
Okay, public comment, the applicant's presentation is now closed. And vote. During my time on the board, I don't think we've ever really do policy. It's, I didn't hear a sufficiently compelling reason, and I don't think I have a good particular house. I don't see a sufficiently compelling reason, and our policy also requires enclosure to be in the rear, which this is in the front.
question to staff and all of your
We wanted to at least provide some comments if the board was willing to entertain enclosure.
remedial work done on the existing structure in order to even justify the last day of the second floor. Which is all of the elements of the piazza raised. Imagine if they wanted to on the first level and restore the piazza element, and then they were asking to trade and then entertain.
There's some other creative ways to get to the place without imposing that. Support.
I'll just make a motion for.
No, no, separate.
Make a motion for.
We have a motion for denial as submitted. Put to the vote. Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Julia, in favor. Bill,
Yeah.
the chair votes to the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Thank you.
And item number 6, 6 Trelo Street.
Trailer is requesting preliminary approval for construction of 2 buildings on vacant lot governed by Factory Control HUD. It's new order in the old and historic district. This is the location of Trailer. It's currently a parking lot. Site photos. Trailer Street. Hi, comment, we want to flag each other at the end of April. Staff and board, sought, the commercial. It was well favored, in its architectural direction. There were a few components that you guys wanted us to study, which was specification of massing, some illustration, and then some decorative elements like trim, and some Juliet balconies, which you'll see as we move through, have been. So again, nearly fully paved parking lot in its existing state. Proposal for 2 detached, single residential. Reminder of the context. So governed by HUD, that is prelude and 5 minutes before. Next slide. And then I'll stop here quickly to just talk about for exchange, which is currently under construction. We'll see, you'll see, brick and wood siding, 8 Prelude, which flanks the property to the north. We have smooth stucco with cast stone details, and then 5-minute Atlantic Wharf, smooth stucco. We've got wood columns, wood railing, some metal louvers, metal railing, sort of a mixed bag in here there. But as we talk about the materials and the elevations, just want to make a note. So here's the updated street elevations, our line drawings. Here is the landscape rendering. So a reminder, the south setback is a 15-foot type B landscape buffer. This is highly prescriptive in the size, species, and the number of plantings. What is present here, what I think is really obvious is how lush that southern border is going to be, what an asset it will be to the neighbors to the south. You can also see heightened processional experience for guests to enter in those interior courtyards. You can also see through hardscape the loggia that will be underneath each structure at the ground floor. I'll note a couple of things that we implemented in terms of staff and board comments. We've streamlined the projections along the north side. We recessed the garage bays by 2 feet. Particularly important on Concord to an effort to get change those carriage doors to the outswing along. But do note that this is well within the property of the driveway. Also, we'll introduce the complexity of the elevated slab in the 3rd floor portion of each building. So, in effort to keep this squarely within IRC code compliance, we did an elevated crawl space under those 3rd floor areas, or I guess to eliminate that elevated slab story so that we can maintain 3 heated square footage stories above. In section, the result that we worked with the building inspectors. And then we can probably move ahead to the first elevation. Okay. For staff request, we lowered our ground floor. We are now 8 feet from slab. And this is not only per board's request, but also more aligned with the 2 feet above freeboard FEMA compliant. In the component of the building, you've got the elevated slab. We'll have to, have the presence of flood vents there, but these lower 2-story portions of the building will have some louver screening because will be occupied by the garage underneath. So both street sides will have operable garages underneath, and then of materials, staff had requested a change in material at the ground. Masonry, ground floor, still limestone, smooth stucco finish there, and then a cast stone band board around the perimeter to differentiate, or I guess terminate the transition to siding above.
Okay, here we see the east elevation. Really, this is the streetscape that you'll see along Concord. The majority of the Prelude building is inside this structure. You'll see a little bit of that southern projection. But mostly you'll see this elevation where you do have the right, and then along the south, I'm sorry, can you go back? Board requested we eliminate Juliet Balconies along that street front as well. So in the south elevation, next slide, we removed them. Previously, they were sort of along these hyphens. Now, because we've lowered those three-story portions of the building, this finished floor is 2 feet lower, so there was no need to enter from the ground floor anymore. We're not entering the first floor. It's a little more celebrated and ceremonial, a grander.
You've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, great. So then we've got the Prelude streetscape. Really no change there aside from the recessed garage doors. Overall, I think that you'll find there's a simplification of administration, so there's more consistency among the composition. Here, so the Gilliard is a great example of a smooth stucco finish. We're looking for that sort of medium acid etch. The cast stone details. This image shows the level of sort of brick tooth that we're after. This won't be a painted wire cut. It'll be a nice clean brick, have a handmade feel. Copper lanterns at the entry. The lantern with the yoke is proposed for the logias underneath. And then this bottom row, this is the color palette that we're after. Some warm whites, bronze windows, bronze roof. And then this last image, that entry sequence will have no rail, pair of wood doors. That will conclude the progress up to date. I'm sure you'll have questions about the elevated slab though.
Thank you. Questions for the applicant? Do you know what kind of windows you're using?
Yeah, so we've been looking mostly at Colby. Nonetheless, despite vendor preference, it will be aluminum clad, wood interior, but hopefully with the 5/8 inch mullion.
To avoid 2 exits or sprinklers, or what is the sprinkler?
Mostly sprinklers. That was the goal, right? The intent was that you wouldn't perceive it from the exterior. You can see it in section, how you transition between the floors. It's a 2-foot discrepancy between the two. And frankly, it's sort of a nice segment in terms of creating a punctuation in the foyer. Right?
All right, do we have any public comment? Okay, Frank, you'll get that to me. Oh, excuse me, we do have one public comment. We have an email from Wendy Bartlett. Our next door neighbor, Scott Corbon, has provided us. Yeah. Please come back. Yes, you're right. That's
The next, actually, it's for 180 Track.
Sorry about that. Well, I thought it would be a good, sorry, bad. Oh, it's just a non-application. Okay, now Frank, you can give us city staff comments.
Staff has worked with the applicant and notes the refinements since conceptual. They include better proportioned columns at Prelude Street, the introduction of a differentiated base material change for the separated gable end, simplification of exterior trim and elements, the removal of objective bays, which also help bring unity to the north and south facade, and the enhanced entries are perhaps more important since the entries are off-street. The applicant has addressed board and staff concerns from the conceptual review. Therefore, staff recommendation is for preliminary approval.
Do you want to respond to anything raised in the staff comments and recommendations? The applicant's presentation is now closed. We will move to more discussion and vote.
Staff's comments sounded, it's like a lot. Report has been addressed.
Appreciate your work with staff. And I think staff, I agree. I'll make a motion. Preliminary approval with staff comments. And wondering, one thing I was wondering, what's the material?
Documents, we would see what they are, everything else.
Still have time to maybe we should go. Yeah, basic materials.
Makes things easier if you're willing to provide mock-ups for final.
Sure.
Let's put it that way, so I'll just leave it at that.
So we have a motion on the floor for preliminary approval with staff comments. Do you have a second? The motion to a vote. Bill Moore?
Yeah, in favor.
Bill?
Yeah.
Julia? And chair votes the majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Almond. Thank you. The agenda item number 7 is 91 Nassau Street. Frankie, could you give us an introduction and overview, please?
Is 91 Nassau here? Oh, just here. 91 Nassau is requesting conceptual approval for new rear residence. The existing structure is a category 4 and east side circa 1852 in the old city district. The location of the existing structure on Nassau. An existing site photo. And Sanford map showing the existing structure we previously reviewed for restoration. And we will turn it over to the applicant.
Good evening, I'm Sean McLaughlin, I'm representing the ownership group. Thank you staff for all the feedback along the way. I hope we address that to make support for the application. Happy to walk through the application. I don't know if there's specifics you guys would like me to is the lot survey. Front house, big project. Back house, a little bit of a different project, but also a big project undertaking. Check the box with feedback as pertains to the audit term. And then also like I weighed in really heavily with the functionality of the back unit. Just like flow orientation and trying to bring up to incorporate like a minimalist feel, I guess you would say. I'm not a designer, right? So I guess next slide. Any questions on that slide? Yeah. So as you can see, the wonderful project in the front and then the back project. Again, trying to orient around some of the field. There's the elevations that I think were specifically called out last time. Clark addressed those appropriately. Subordinate to the front house. And I guess next slide. Area pictures, wall work on the adjacent property. I guess Clark forgot to leave out the dilapidated fence separating it from the Family Dollar lot. But yeah, I mean that's the area. You can see kind of the more modern infill that's across the street. And behind that, we kind of took some of the characters of the monoslip roof that they had done on another infill in the back. And next slide. Yep. So it's the floor plan. Any questions? Next slide, please. Elevations, again, ensuring that it's subordinate to the front house. Next slide. Once again, subordinate. Next slide. Please. All right. Thank you very much. Just know that I'm from the area so my whole life here, so I'm very high key on preserving integrity of the neighborhoods and historic values. So thank you all.
Mr. Parker, do you have board members have any questions for the applicant?
Just kind of walk us through the materials that you're proposing.
Yeah, so the corrugated siding, I can't really tell like the gauge of it or anything specific of that nature, but the corrugated siding, I mean, just has a really useful lifespan on it. And then, if I still own it or the next owners, hopefully they don't have to come in here and ask for modifications because we invested in the useful life of the structure. It's generally like a pretty easy application. I guess the windows would be something we might discuss as well. Oh yeah.
Talk about materials, what.
Windows would be impact rated glass, just to again protect the structural integrity of the property. Obviously, impact windows cost more, but again, it's all about protecting the structure. And then, the inside would be like a wooden type of window, and then the aluminum cladding on the exterior side. Again, more of that minimalist, modern type feel to bring it up to where things are trending, I guess, for that. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, does everyone's
Anna Catherine Farrell with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society has a standpoint. In relation to the front house, the rear building is too wide. And the height should be reduced to be more vertical based on typical Charleston proportions. Further, the architectural direction and the quality of the material palette should be restudied to better relate to the historic context, given these concerns that the structure is not architecturally compatible with the existing historic structure. We appreciate the sight lines on the drawings, but we believe that this
Is there anyone else speaking from the public? Frank, you'll give us, you'll have the opportunity to
Oh,
respond
yeah, sorry.
after the city staff comments and recommendations. Frank, you can provide those.
So staff observed that while this is in line behind of this proposed building are very visible from the street. Proposed building should be more subordinate to the historic structure. Another roof type like a gable might help to achieve this. The architectural style, while differentiated from the historic structure, should be compatible and complementary. So we're recommending study. Corrugated steel siding is not an appropriate location, is not an appropriate material for this location. Balconies are atypical of the area. Closet windows on the west elevation should be centered within the facade. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval for height, scale, and mass. General architectural direction. The staff comments.
Thank you, Frankie. Mr. McLaughlin, did you want to respond to anything raised in the public comment, or city staff comments and recommendations? You could go.
Oh, yeah, sorry about that.
You can rebroadcast them to.
Okay, cool. So look, I spent a lot of time in the neighborhood. I spent a lot of time with the Eastside Community Council, attended their meetings, spent time with the neighboring church. They all were pretty excited about the design. I was also like pretty cognizant about really like the subordinate type of concept when we were talking about with the architect. If we didn't want to put in something that was kind of trying to reflect another era at the time when we were doing it, because we thought it would detract from the utility of the front of the home, which is beautiful. The roof structure, it's a little bit of an issue because look, like I would pull that thing forward and put a gable roof, I guess, there, but then the setbacks create an issue at that point. If we were to do that, because we put the A roof, I guess, right, then it kind of defeats the whole purpose of being able to create a sustainable investment in the neighborhood from a battery account perspective. And so, yeah, that's kind of my feedback. I really appreciate everyone's thoughts on the property.
All right, public comment and the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion. Vote.
To stare at this property from the west, we see the existing historic house from Union Street pretty clearly. It's visible to the public even at the west. And I feel like the scale and mass, like staff said, are floor plan makes sense. Struggling a little bit with the general architectural direction and the materiality. Maybe for something more contemporary, not trying to replicate a little single house or anything like that, but particular flavor at the moment might make the bar, given how visible it will be. Really. Definitely not a preference.
I would say that, agree with, several comments. I this board. Yeah, maybe some thought in that. And within that, the material palette, and then potentially the fenestration to quite a selection of fenestration sizes, and sympathetic rhythm, at least, would be something that might be worth entertaining. As it relates to the front house, it doesn't, I'm not traditional window sizing or patterning, some degree of more cohesion, if you will, particular now at south elevation. I think quite a number of different fenestration sizes, facings and patterning. And that the part of the materiality, especially like the nickel gap, siding, things like that can work. Curved about the corrugated metal. It does present itself to the rear of the building, just at a glance. You have it, corrugated metal. If the detailing were more developed, it might be something that could be entertaining. But I would see maybe it being used more as the accent, and maybe used as the dominant contrast to what we're seeing. I don't know how this recommendation works with these excellences. Recommendations, so partial conceptual, but by fact that I believe conceptual in total is height, scale, mass, and general architectural direction. So I would think, and I agree with the comment about these sort of general architectural direction, it would probably trigger, I would in my mind, more of the world because of that one. This way, yeah, no, I don't have a lot of reading about the height, scale, and mass as staff doesn't general architectural direction. That would be sort of hinge if you guys go.
Sort of scale. Footprint, take this building right on the edge, be too big, or just stay, maybe just on the edge of being too large. And yeah, there's a lot of covering over the small space. That really doesn't help that, however, certainly believe it. I think it can squeeze in mass idea. serving the basic concept of compatible with materiality. Not And the windows are easy. I think the penetration is way, so I think that decreased it. And I think even if you say that it basically the mass is acceptable, I think.
I generally agree with my fellow board members that, I do think that the architectural direction needs study, but I'm not opposed to something that are very, I would be okay with something that's very different.
Me, for the other board members, that general architectural direction really is reflected in that materiality and then for me, primarily.
Part of the master.
That's comments.
A motion on the floor for deferral of staff comments. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Yep. Yep. Bill?
Yep.
Fillmore?
Yeah, in favor.
The chair votes the majority and the motion. Any questions, Mr. McLaughlin?
Well, you were saying some very architectural words I don't understand. So the fenestration.
Fenestration is the windows, window, but fenestration basically means putting those in the building, but windows and window sizes.
So yeah, just to comment around that, there was like the structural plan got layered in like last second, and a lot of windows have been stripped out, and I don't think that the reorientation placement got sussed out appropriately when it needed it. Like, yeah, that didn't look good. Like the corrugated siding piece, like totally happy to make amends on that. I'm happy to continue to work on that. I just, like, now the street's pretty hard on this, so I'm trying to get it like a little bit more united. So I guess I'm a little bit confused, like conceptual approval for height, scale, mass, then a deferral.
It's a deferral in total.
Oh, okay.
Because the conceptual approval will also warrant approvable height, scale, mass, and general architectural, all those things. So with general architectural direction not being there yet, it warrants deferral.
Okay, gotcha. So the thing that's important for you guys to understand next is more of the architectural, like we don't need to hone in on anything else except our.
Who's Mr. Ferguson still?
He is, he's on vacation,
Yeah.
Friday, sir.
And so you both could reach out to staff for some clarification, and then I'm sorry he's not here, but he speaks the language.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe they can reach out for a little more.
We can email both of you the staff comments that were adopted.
Okay.
And then if you have questions on that, we can meet with them.
All right, great, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Agenda item number 8, 180 Trad Street. 180 Trad is requesting conceptual approval for a new carport with Bochamp. The existing home is a category 4 in Charlestown, circa 1914, in the old and historic district. Is the property's location on Trad. Site. And showing the existing home. Those applicants.
I'm Ross Ritchie with Royal Architects here on and so for the design, it's a carport and loggia, and there's an existing gate and opening in the masonry wall that is on front. So that's kind of where the existing car is parked, and so siding this structure, really looked at the garden, the main house, and how it kind of addresses the current gate. So it's kind of set back from the street and really kind of trying to integrate the garden aspect of the property. Right, and we recently got approval and variance to slide it. And we can, that's kind of the existing kind of gate parking area in the back. And garden. Pretty high masonry wall in the back. And then the piers would be kind of would be aligned with the piers of the gate, both sides of the gate. So, and then trying to keep the height to built to the minimum going through there. So it's all masonry piers, stucco, open. The only wall kind of separating that parking area from the loggia, part of the structure that addresses the garden. And the existing and the entrance gate. Target plan showing the structure there. There is a clay tile roof, a flat clay tile roof, which is matching the main house. And the way that, let's go to the next one. So as it is kind of on really close to the property line, we have it kind of parapet with stucco on the property line side with the clay tile sitting back. Clay tile will allow us, and then some kind of heavier rafters, kind of still kind of creating the weight of the clay tile. There's a view from the gate, and beyond the gate, we can go to the next one. And this is from the garden view. View from the Colonial Street Garden, which we have met with the neighbors and received a approval from them, so it's in the DAR design. On that side is just kind of a recessed panel of the stucco there with the clay tile there, the gap on that side. Just trying to keep it down as much, still allowing privacy there, but still trying to not be such a big wall. And we already have a lot of larger trees there creating some privacy. Also not allowing any water to go on that side. Section just showing the materials, everything is wood, heavier, clay tile. Questions?
Do you have any questions for the applicant? Gable and sort of wall, it's stucco on frame, is that what?
It'll have a, drainage matrix and, kind of the proper way to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Is there anyone speaking from the public? There was one written note. Now it's broken. Okay, there's an email from neighbor Lenny Project. Our next door neighbor, Scott Arbon, provided a plan for a garage he hopes to build near the northern property line at the corner of Pratt and Colonial Street. County and I have reviewed the plans and we do not object to the design or location of the proposed structure. We hope the city will look favorably on our good neighbor's proposal. I hope this finds you well. Best wishes, Lenny. All for public comment. So we'll move into city staff comments and recommendations. Frankie, can you get those those?
Staff appreciated the roof material mimicking the existing parapet wall on the property line should be Staff would recommend changing the roof to a hip roof over the carport portion, keeping the intersecting hip over the loggia, adding half-round gutter shed on the adjacent property. We assume was the intent of the parapet wall. Staff recommendation is conceptual approval with staff comments and a final review by staff.
Mr. Ritchie, did you want to respond to anything raised in the public comment and the staff comment?
Yes, with the roof, studying the roof and the location of where the carport is and where the piers are, a hip and an overhang that's all proper scale, we would be over the property line. So that's where, you offset that hip and, have them come in and turn, so that there's definitely a lot of thought, behind, how do we make this work at this location, where the existing gate and, kind of access to the property. Yes, we can also kind of relook at, that was kind of the reason behind, it would be a overhang on one side and then kind of chopped off with minimal.
Public comment to the applicant's presentation is now closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
What I had written down was, the planning project likes it.
But the meeting, I just wrote.
But, I do understand the logic behind that roof form, because, you don't want to drain onto the neighbor's property or have your roof form encroach over the property line. I'm personally okay with the quirky form of it, it's just the treat it a little differently. The rest of the design is really nice. I'm gonna
There's certainly precedent for warning gate would have, if it isn't about the house that solves that problem. Structure. Yeah, well, I think there really is, there's not enough stuff. Just to jog that thing a little bit. I really think maybe it's okay because I'm not sure there's another effective way to do it. And you would end up truncating the E on the hip, I think, to keep it on the side of the property line. It's attractive, but I think the portion on that side is going to be precedent right down the street.
So for the applicant, are you preserving the iron gate, or are you converting it into sliding, or what's that?
Yes, it will be preserved, and then but it will be changed to a sliding, so it'll be attached in the middle. Here in the photo, the only thing that potentially would have been a hang up would have been concern really being the fact that it's a huge stuck-on frame, and the idea, the premise of stuck-on frame is supposed to look like a real stuck-on. Really concerned that, I love tile, got a great selection with that. I assume that the capital proposal would be cheap on tile. Concern. I don't want to sound delicate about it. Just when you see stuck-on frame piles, I just go to the detail of it. There was maybe stuck-on masonry, just a street that didn't have any indentions or anything to really call that out. And maybe that could be done with the stuck-on frame. That would be something I would think might be more palatable, at least as far as I'm concerned. I think rising and recessing is sort of calling attention to the form, whereas I think maybe something just clean and simple, like just let it. Joints to make that work. So, and it's gonna be absolutely beautiful to look at from the house. The south side. Great. Richwood materials and all that happening. So I just think maybe since it's doing something a little odd, sort of truncated on the north side, maybe just keep it clean. And not calling by adding selling. Keep it clean.
For conceptual approval with board comments to restudy materiality and details of the north gate.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval, with a board comment to restudy the materiality and details of. Julia? In favor? Bill?
Yeah,
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Okay, agenda item number 9, 41 Broad Street. Frank, can you give us an introduction?
Broad is requesting conceptual approval to reestablish Clash Transom on the riverfront. It is a category 2 in Charlestown, circa 1835 in the. It is the location on Broad Street, existing site photos of Broad Street. And some sandboard maps. Turn it over to the applicant.
I'm Crummy with Synchronicity Architects, and we are requesting approval window and the existing door on the Broad Street elevation. We believe that the reestablishment of the transom would allow greater depth of light into that first floor. And we also believe that it would there's storefronts on Broad Street as well, namely 40 Broad, 36 Broad, and 15 Broad. We're also requesting the replacement of a door slab on the Elliott Street elevation, which is in the rear on the second story. We'd like to replace the existing door slab with a full light.
Board members have any questions for this?
Curious about the existing front doors. What is your recommendation? I guess I'm curious about that really heavy structure between the transom and the door. Or the door is lower than the bottom of the transom, you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. We just believe that it's just like a wood panel, like trying to replace it and turn it out with a glass panel.
Any other questions for the applicant?
It's just gonna be a glass panel with wood trim.
All right, do we have any public comment? All right, so give us any staff comments and recommendations, please.
Staff recommends breaking the horizontal pattern of the windows similar to the present image 40 Broad. Other than that, we are recommending conceptual approval with the final review by staff.
The applicant to respond to anything raised with that comment?
Yeah, we'd be happy to work with that and try and work with staff to look up the next movement.
Applicant's presentation is not closed. We'll move into board discussion and vote.
Get transoms back. Just that's one back.
And like the middle transom taller than the other two.
Yeah.
I mean, any other sort of precedent you would look at, those would all, the transom bars would all line up. When they, for some reason, that panel is.
Back here on the old survey card.
Well, the survey
It's
card
the
didn't
same
have
way.
that. It was
Right,
already.
but the bar is lower than the other.
It's way better.
And staff could not find a photo showing it without the enclosed transoms.
Yes, that was changed a little bit.
I'll make a motion for conceptual approval with a board comment encouraging the applicant to study uniform height of transom and the lower door to achieve that. And I'll review it. Oh, sure, I'm back on it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval, with staff comment and the board comment to restudy, to study the uniform height of the transom and the lower door, and final review by staff. Do you have a second?
Second.
The motion to a vote, Fillmore,
We're in favor.
Julia,
In favor.
Bill,
Yeah, fair.
chair votes majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Agenda item number 10 has been deferred by the applicant. We are on agenda item number 11 at 92 Morris Street. We have refused from this application. Thank you. Whenever you are ready, you can give us an introduction and overview.
to elevate and renovate the rear addition and a new pool. It is a category 4 in Canberra, Elliver, circa 1880 in the Old City District. Here's the location. Morris. Take photos. Next to Morris Street. And more maps showing the history of the structure. Where are you in?
Board members, Erin Lanier with Julia Land Architects. On behalf of the new owner of 92 Morris Street, and I'll just clarify, we're elevating and renovating the existing structure, adding a rear addition. For like atmosphere.
I think I had typed up that slide before we realized that the description on the application was truncated. And we fixed it on the agenda, but not on the slide.
Gotcha, okay. Well, I'll go ahead to the next slide, please. So, as you can see, this is a two-story wood frame single house that was purchased by our client earlier this year with the goal of restoring it for use as his personal residence. As you can see from these images, the building is set back from the street, it's right on the ground, and it is in really poor shape due to years of neglect. It was most recently a duplex, and previously included a large two-story rear addition that was ordered down by the chief building official in 2018. And the photos in the bottom left here show the current rear elevation, which had been left exposed all that time until just a few months ago. You can make out there sort of the original roof form of the single house and then remnants of that recent addition. Next slide, please. So for context, this property is closely surrounded by historic single houses to the north and west, and then some newer, taller residences such as Morris Square to the east, and then a completely vacant lot directly to the south. Next slide. For the survey card and board map, 92 Morris was constructed in the 1880s and originally had a single-story porch. It wasn't quite the full length of the building. By 1888, there was also a 1.5-story dependency structure to the rear and a small shop at the sidewalk. Over the next several decades, the property grew to the north. The second floor was added to the piazza, and additional accessory structures were constructed along with a small secondary dwelling behind the main house. By the 1940s and 50s, only the original single house remained, and it was likely in the 1960s when the property came to end that the large addition shown here in plan and photos on the right was added and various other alterations. That's a little difficult to see there on the right, but it was quite large, and as you can see from the photo just above there, it projected out beyond the left face of the house. Next slide, please. Here is an existing and proposed site plan. The scope of this project includes restoring and elevating the historic baths to meet the city's CFE requirement, and then adding a new 2-story addition via a hyphen at the rear, and constructing a pool house at the north end of the lot. There will also be substantial improvements to the land site, and we're just indicating something conceptual here, but those plans will be submitted by the landscape architect separately for review and approval at a later time. Next slide. Here's the floor plan. Since the first being proposed, we'll be restoring the piazza and adding a piazza screen. The exterior metal stair goes away in favor of a new internal stair. And then we'd like to sensitively add to the rear via hyphen a new 2-story mast that steps in on both the east and west sides, but largely within the street. Right. Our footprint is largely matching the first. Here again, we're restoring the existing piazza and penetration patterns at the front and lightly connecting to the new addition at the rear. Next slide. Here's our existing and proposed south and west elevation. Really just cleaning up the front mass, keeping everything pretty modest and traditional, going back with period appropriate details, and replicating existing columns and balusters where needed. In addition, we're proposing 2 stories of living space under a gated roof that steps down from and sensitively connects to the historic mass via a bossy hyphen. Given the diminutive scale of the historic core and its interior spaces, it was really important to our client But at the new addition, we have ample opportunities for natural light and use of the rear garden. The materials and fenestration pattern there are slightly more contemporary and clearly differentiate the new from the old. So we tried to be as deferential as possible by recessing the addition 3 foot 6 inches from the west elevation of the historic structure and a full 6 feet back from everything. Next slide. The east elevation, which is minimally visible, we provided a distinct break between the old and the new masses. You'll see we're also requesting to remove a non-original flue. This flue does not appear to have ever been associated with a fireplace, and given its age and condition and lack of exterior detail, it seems impractical to try to elevate it with the house. The rear elevation continues that more contemporary aesthetic with form with gap siding with minor corners and large format fenestration, but that will be completed in the public right there. Next slide, please. At the northeast front of the property, we'd like to construct a new pool house. As you may notice on the site plan, the pool is a prominent feature in the rear garden, but will not be visible. This structure will have an unconditioned first floor, and therefore it'll sit just above grade. But we're proposing to cut it in cedar shakes, and then it'll have a simple demonstration pattern that picks up on the aesthetic of the new addition. Here's a site section to demonstrate the relationship between the old and new structures and the important nature of the 2 rear masses of this work. Next slide. And we'll end with these 3D views to highlight the minimal visibility of the rear addition and pool house and the overall composition of the proposed improvement. That's all I have.
Any questions for the applicant?
So the Heisen roof is pretty much a flat roof, is that right? And I see it's noted on, actually on the site plan, that mini split condensers are going up on that roof.
Yes.
Right, okay. We quite push them to the middle as much as possible, so they're not. Okay. And then the natural cedar or the pool house, if it's natural.
We haven't gotten that far, honestly. I'm not sure yet what direction it will go. We're sort of imagining that the vision, the house will be all sort of a single color with the bronze, so it may take on a similar flavor, or it may just be a natural,
And if it's composite, it'll be probably a solid color. Right.
Your question?
It was, I think that the west elevation of the addition is probably not terribly visible.
Correct.
No public comment? Thank you. You'll give us city staff comments and recommendations.
Staff observations, the proposed addition to the existing house is minimally visible, and we couldn't find an angle where the pool house was visible from the public right of way. Those alterations to the previous piazza enclosure help clarify what was an upward addition. The staff only had a comment for the applicant to double check their floor plans for the pool house, because it was like there was an extra label for bath in there somewhere. But other than that, we recommend conceptual approval and final review by staff.
James, do you want to respond to anything that was mentioned? Applicant's presentation has covered, and we can begin discussions and vote.
And it's a little retail solution, stepping is appropriate. So first house comments and recommendation. Conceptual approval, final review by staff, and she'll fix the notes on the
Okay, we have a motion on the floor for conceptual approval with final review by staff. Do I have a second?
Second.
Vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes majority, and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. run to the ladies' room. We'll take a brief, I mean, honestly.
Okay, 2 minutes with that.
2 minutes.
You're taking a 2-minute break.
Okay.
So, I don't remember, I know I've gotten them before, I just don't remember. So, I've seen sometimes after an applicant comes and the presentation goes, sometimes you guys hand them. Sometimes.
There was this period when that happened, when Dennis used to do that, but I don't think you do that now, like the staff comment.
Yeah, so, I don't know if that might be helpful, but also, I didn't know they did a guy who had done a lot of things, you know.
On Lawrence Street?
Yes. If there could be a sheet handed to them that says, make sure that if you, during construction, encounter any extraordinary conditions, or if you feel you have a need to propose any, you know, changes to the approval you've been given, you must consult with staff, or something like that. It's pretty obvious.
They're not really emailed out, right?
We're back, we're getting back to that.
Yeah.
Our new agenda tech coordinator has done a great deal of work on that, and she is, you know, and results back to the applicant.
And we're catching up on, we have a sheet, we're we're working back from the beginning of last July, working
We're
forward,
missing some uploads.
and also doing it in correspondence with ones that are coming, with register results, I'm trying to do those and do those at the same time, we're trying to catch up on all the results, that way Intergov will really be, we'll be able to see every step of the review.
Gotcha. Yeah, I
That'd
was
be
wondering-
a great opportunity to stick in some general
Something
conditions.
that says,
And I
hey.
do mention it at the permit center too, at FR too, if like they're removing signs, like, what, a little more than you think, come back, because we had a couple of stop work orders that come in and we're like, this would have been better if you called and said like, oh my gosh, I opened up like a whole situation and I need to talk, and we're gonna need to take off a lot more. Okay,
Yeah.
come talk to us, like, we're here.
Instead, you were gonna hand them a physical piece of paper, that thing would be bright red.
Maybe we need like a new resource sheet that says they're involved.
More good though.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Anyways. Okay. Agenda item number 12, the revised bar sign policy statement general.
Okay. Thank you, board members. I will start with a lot of this off the top, but BARL had been handling a lot of signage requests that were signage bills from staff's decisions. And in light of that, we recognize staff board, and I'm sure all of you do too, recognize the fact that Morrison Drive, where a lot of these are coming from, is an evolving part of the city. And so we took a look at what sign policy is in place for this part of the city, and that was our general sign policy. And in doing that, we felt like we tweaked it, we messed around with it, and we ended up coming up with maybe the historic corridor needs its own sign policy. And while the historic corridor is varied, obviously there's a lot of different streetscapes in that area, we really needed to crack down on something, so we had something in place that really addresses Morrison Drive. That was that was the direction. So out of that, we also ended up making some tweaks to our general sign policy statement. And I'm sorry I didn't bring printed copies, but I can kind of give you a rundown of some things that we tweaked. The general sign policy statement was adopted in 2007. It's 15 years old. You know, there's a lot that's happened since then. A couple of the things that we added into the sign policy statement that I hope you will be accepting of are in point number 2, and I'm just going to read those to you and kind of give you a background of why we did, or why we want to do it. The statement, there shall be no presumption of approval for corporate logos or branding. That part's new. And it reads into, instead, signs should be part of an overall graphic system. That's old. we recognize the fact that Charleston's a unique place, signage is a unique and challenge, and we want to make sure that there is no presumption that your corporate identity, national corporate brand is going to get an approval for a sign. That was that's kind of what that statement's about. And then there's another statement in there that says, private agreements regarding tenant signage to which the city is not a party of are irrelevant to the submission for approval and will not be considered. So, as many of you probably know, there are sign lease agreements that are worked into, leases for commercial buildings, and they are not something that we're privy to, and they're not something that necessarily we feel like should be really, they're not relevant to it. So that was kind of the additions to the general sign policy statement. That's, everything else is original. What questions, I'm sorry, you're supposed to ask that, but what questions do you have?
Can we maybe, I know we're not talking about the other policy yet.
It'll be relevant to like very similar.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, do there have to be two, or could there just be like, for the historic corridor, could there just be like, in addition to, or as an exception to the general sign policy?
Well, I think for clarity and cleanliness, that's the direction we went in. Let's like tweak let's tweak the original, and then let's just come up with something new. You'll see that the big difference in the two is that the historic corridor policy statement talks, it's point number 4. Point number 4. There, with that being an evolving part of the city, it's a mix of historic buildings, yes, but a lot of new. There is some flexibility related to illumination. Some flexibility related to illumination. The BARL has reviewed several appeals lately, and their general direction, they feel like illumination could be used if it's restrained and neutral in color, and it can be used to identify the building only, not to identify individual tenants. That was a real push there. Well, in the sign policy statement that applies to our other districts, it says that illuminated signs are not appropriate for the old and historic district and old city district. So that's one of the big difference between the two.
Yeah, that statement, I don't know what that means. And that is so vague as to be meaningless, I think.
The statement about being inappropriate,
Yeah.
that's on,
Illuminated signs, that's in the old district, I didn't.
yeah.
Illuminated signs are not appropriate for the old and historic district and old city district. If I were reading that and I got denied, I'd just go call all over. Because it says, it doesn't say I can't have it.
Yeah.
I mean, you know,
Was that the idea that?
it was the idea to make it vague.
I don't know what it meant in 2007, because that's an original.
Oh, I know, but I read the whole thing, so I'm
I
just.
remember one in particular.
Just mentioned.
In my office, someone in my office suggested this possible adjustment to that. Illuminated signs are generally not permitted in the old and historic district and will be considered on a case-by-case basis for restaurants and businesses open at night.
One of the things that does do is conversations surrounding, when is the business open? Oh, it's not being needed for something that's only open during the day, and that's an ongoing conversation. So I think that does hit area that we haven't met with this policy. So you're suggesting that for the original policy? Yeah, I like that.
So the appeals that keep coming to the BARL, is there a common theme to those appeals?
Lit signage, individual tenant lit signage, and then we have one that was presented that is a big corporate logo colors of the branding on the top of the building not integrated into the architecture, eliminated. Are some of the key elements on that one.
The size hasn't come into play.
Size hasn't.
We put it on one, but they don't really put it because they already paid for it. You already have the sign created, but it's just kind of fun. And it was a little bit, I think that's typically, I don't think people have the sign manufactured before. So I know that that's why size doesn't come into play.
Sizing is really detailed in our zoning code related to signage, so outside our policies, it really does get.
It's pretty specific.
I just didn't know, because there's some pretty big buildings going on.
Oh, I mean,
I would imagine that.
What were the other ideas, Julia? I'm a very intelligent person now.
I mean, I'll just say, okay,
so on in the this historic corridor.
Yeah.
So, illumination, you can have an illuminated sign that identifies the building.
We have a monument sign that identifies the building. We have a building sign on the building that's illuminated as long as it's restrained and neutral in color.
Color, it says color and illumination
Yes.
is discouraged,
Yes.
or maybe consider one.
No, we're kind of
So-
jumping, but since we're kind of looking at those differences on the historic corridor, some of the same additions that we added to the original sign policy, we've added into the historic corridor policy in number 2. But there's a stopgap at number 6 where the city architect can, it basically requires 2 sets of eyeballs before it gets put in or up. And then number 4, where you're at, that one is pretty happy, it's got a lot in it, and some of this is echoed in that we want a consistent graphics package, and we want your sign to be related to your building. And so that's where the terminology of signage should be harmonious with the building and its context and aesthetically congruous with the size of the building.
And I mean, the comprehensive sign package is.
It's critical.
Yeah, I mean, is it encouraged or required?
it could be with the buildings that have 3 or more units.
Or is, I mean, is there some way to, I mean, it may not be required for a little one tenant building, but maybe it should be required. It certainly makes it less confusing.
I'm gonna rely on some signage experts over there at the table on if it's required, but are getting tenant signage that our response is, this is setting the tone for all your tenant signage. For all your tenant signs, you're setting the tone with that very first one.
And a lot of the times the problem has been, they apply for the tenant sign as they get tenants, so they might not know who all of the tenants are going to be when they apply for the first sign. So we wouldn't require an entire package with the first one, but with each subsequent one, I think is when we're requiring the documentation to show that it is cohesive with what's on the building.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. You would know what the signs are exactly going to say until you get your tenants, so you would know what they're going to generally look like, and that could be part of the comprehensive package that is required for.
Yeah,
for
we
3 or
just say
more, sort of where
tenant
you
sign
need to
is
set that.
rep size and location.
We have made people really, really angry at times before, so I think the more, really, the less confusing it is, the more things we have to sort of hang our hat on, the better.
Paragraph 1, so bit about the comprehensive sign package. that was one of my initial comments, was because we've had issues, not with signage, but, with applicants not necessarily following what they're supposed to submit. I just thought that should be, it should be in accordance with whatever y'all put together, the nice, comprehensive, and it might be in here and perhaps it's something that I should know, but are there actual application requirements for signs specifically in here? So.
There are requirements such as you have to provide elevations of the building, show the size, show that the size of the sign meets the requirement, things of that nature, but I don't know if there's a requirement in this sign application or ordinance that requires a package.
Yeah. The other day we had, and we all looked at this, it was 595 King. Yeah, 595 King, which is a nice looking building, large, it's just recently completed. And there's a restaurant in it that has very kind of subdued signage and mostly window graphics. They've got a little fluttering banner that I don't think they do. But then another sign company came in and they had, I forget, his initials RES or RLS and a huge lit clown. And it was for a nail salon. And it was so big, the letters were 20 inches and then the crown was another 22 inches. And it basically, it went over the top of the cornice of the building, or the cornice. And it just looked, we denied it. But that's why it's really, we really need something that can help, because these folks just, and it was illuminated too, yeah. Yeah. And anyway, so it's just, it would be lovely to have some guidance so that we could, when we are meeting with these sign applicants, that we can say, hey, look, this is why. So.
The illumination there, if it could be more specific, I think it would be better, because, you know, we have, people want to illuminate the signs, I think, and we certainly allow them in certain locations we have recently, and I think that's probably legit. To ask for it, but it would be nice if we had some specific items, like, you know, places that are open after certain hours, and if they're not, then, you know,
Right, that makes sense, because I think you're gonna end up with the same issue that I understand you have with just saying architectural merit. The second sentence of number 4, I'm looking at that, and harmonious with the building and its context and aesthetically congruous. I could see someone getting denied and starting to view illuminated signs as something that they can do as right.
Well, we definitely, there are some board members and staff that wish that this had more teams, for certain. But on one hand, it's more than what we have now. And so I would also add that yeah, you're right, that there could be some subjectivity to how that's, just like architecture, there can be some subjectivity on how staff interprets that, but there's always an appeal to the board available to any applicant if they disagree. And then I think your comment, Fillmore, I think you're kind of you're honing in on the one on the general sign policy and the elimination. So if there is any action tonight, I might suggest, if you're comfortable, saving that one, tweaking that, and maybe look at adopting the historic corridor policy. It has been vetted through legal, and we can test it, I don't think a policy has to be in place for 15 years.
we can test it. If we approve it, that's exactly.
And maybe it shouldn't.
No, it has to be vetted by legal.
Yeah,
but
it
seems like we're going to go through the process with it. We ought to try to get it do it as well as we can do it, as opposed to just.
To narrow down the issues, is it really just the illumination part that?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, it might be relatively easy that, a little more specific, you know, on the historic corridor district one, and, you know, most of that stuff is, the problem is the new buildings, the big buildings. But if it's a historic, smaller historic structure, or it's, we're gonna end up with it, and this is obviously what we're gonna have to abide by, and, it's, and I know this may be nitpicky, but it's things like, you know, muted in tone and brightness. I mean, if somebody says, you know, I guess if it's, you know, if it's bright neon orange or something that is not muted, but there's a lot of wiggle room in that. And I don't know, I'm not sure how you fix that without.
It's just a different, the cable, but I
Yeah,
don't
I mean,
know.
would you say, you know, it can't be brighter than X?
Yeah.
And,
The muted in tone.
yeah, I mean, muted in tone, I do not know what that means, honestly.
I think that's where I'm viewing this as, this really
Yeah.
raw. I mean, maybe you don't have to strike it entirely, but maybe it's the way my mind works. I look at ways to get around things. And when something is really, when something is really vague, I can turn it over in my mind and make arguments as to why it should be approved. Yeah, it could be approved.
I mean, you know, I mean, I don't necessarily say that I look at it and go around it, but I look at it and say, I'm standing on the other side of that. What's my argument gonna be?
What exactly? Or is there any ambiguity in that I can
take advantage of? Yeah.
I don't think ambiguity is always so bad, especially when it gives board members the ability to utilize it.
And invariably, you know, well, we always end up being the bad guys, but when it's much less clear, we don't really have anything to hang our hats on, then we really end up being the bad guys. And we do, and, you know, we, from a public perspective, then we appear arbitrary and capricious. And they already think we're that, and so I think we need to try not to keep supporting that public persona.
And is that whole statement about what was it called?
Yeah.
Muted. Does that discount neon? And do the people who have neon turn it off in the daytime? It was muted on light, but there's a little oven mitt on during the day. Yeah. What true? Yeah. That's what
It should, yeah. So, illuminated signs should be on 24/7.
Tori's like, help me.
There were so many months of talking about this, I don't even remember anymore. All right, but no, I do want to get like really detailed feedback from you, especially on any concerns. So muted in tone and brightness, there's concern about its subjectivity. I can see that. That was struck out.
According to board's discretion.
And you know, I really.
We're the arbiters of muted and tone. But how are we gonna run live signage?
This would be my lack of knowledge, but could you say it can be no brighter than X?
Yeah.
Can you insert a number there?
Oh, yeah, you can put lumens in.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Could that be
That's what
specific?
Dennis
Should be
did.
no brighter than.
It's gonna
I
feel
think we need a
relative
little
to
expert.
the location and the size, right? I mean, in some locations, more light might be appropriate than others.
And one day, I mean, your past experience judging signage based on foot candles, and then what were your thoughts? Did you do some of that?
Yes and no. Erin Minigan, actually, when she was the ARS administrator, was talking about that exact same thing. And at one point, we did talk about, she had this really good chart that they used down in, yes, thank you. I was having a brain burp. And I thought it was a great idea, but we never really kind of moved it forward. But I think that's a great idea, because, you know, and King Street was lit up, and it did have a lot of illumination. But then, you know, you get the sign applicant, I had one at Subway on Upper King, they wanted an illuminated right angle sign, and Ivy and Ink next door has an illuminated right angle sign. And they didn't get approval for any of the facade sign or window graphics or their neon, but, you know, so it gets really complicated. So, you know, like I had an application the other day, it's a golden goose, which evidently is issues, I had no idea.
Really expensive.
And, I told them that generally illumination is something that we strongly discourage, because they close at 5 o'clock. So, you know, I think anything that's open after a certain hour should have some illumination.
Reason the banks, things like that are coming through asking for illumination, so.
That is what one of the applicants was. Which we've had to do our own.
How much operation is it key, like,
That's definitely, at least it pares it down.
uh,
I think the best you're gonna get is some sort of a statement that tears this down into categories. There's still gonna be the ambiguity in there, but at least they're gonna know which slot they're fitting into as the structure is.
Is it open for breakfast?
No, but
You know, they're not dinner. If you're open for lunch and dinner, you do have an illuminated sign, but that means your illuminated sign is
some
illuminated
people
for
make it
lunch.
lunch, right?
And if you're only open for dinner.
It's so complex, I know.
And the guy next door who's open for lunch can have it illuminated.
So maybe we discuss all
And so
this
there
and
you
come
go.
back to where they were confused.
Yeah, I know you feel like.
It's a toughie.
I know. I just have one favor, the second paragraph next to the last line, would it be okay if we just took out which our responsibility is to safeguard? Could we just like, okay?
Maybe a holdover. The old.
Our responsibility is to safeguard, it's just awkward and I think it goes without saying.
I'm sorry.
Oh, look in the second paragraph from the top,
Oh.
and then the second
Oh.
line from the bottom of that paragraph.
Thank you.
Yeah, just say you're not compatible with the architectural heritage of Charleston period, yeah. Or just me, because of my background, but words like should and discouraged and may are really words that don't have any real meaning in I don't think, probably, maybe in a legal sense, but, if you're sort of doing, very specific writing, then those words are vague. They're words like only, too much, how much is too much? They don't really have any meaning, so whenever I see them,
Should become shall,
And I think that's
may becomes must.
where when we actually define those in our part of the ordinances. But, I mean, or maybe it's in the principles. Maybe that may be intentionally done for there's flexibility to use like these spaces. Little policies.
and like,
Yeah.
I do
item
like in
two,
paragraph 4,
and item two, in the old city district, there will be no presumption of approval for corporate logos and branding. Instead, signs should be reviewed. Signs will be reviewed as part of the overall.
Must be.
Yes, we're going to review them as part of the overall package, not as part of.
And that gives us a protection to say, well, we can't review it because our policy is that it will be reviewed.
Yeah, and so you look at the position there of saying, okay, if your policy statement is more of a hard line position, but then it says that you do have the ability to present and make a presentation, or an argument, whatever, to the board, staff, or whatever, at least it puts you in the better position. If you leave it ambiguous, then it puts you at a disadvantage. You get hard line, and you say, okay, look, all right, we're going to entertain this. Our standard doesn't say this, but we'll hear you out. I think it's a stronger position. That's where you get rid of the ambiguity, right? I don't know if y'all are willing to put out a statement that that's hard line, but. That's whatever.
Or at least
For
maybe
confirmation.
we could define some of it a little more specifically. And that would give people more, give people more.
Yeah, we really want to get the historic corridor one.
I kind of do, but yes, I do, I also want to get the policies right, and so, yes. I mean, that's in your hands, obviously. I want to kind of run through what I've identified that has raised red flag, and that would be the second paragraph, that phrase, which our responsibility is to safeguard. If we run up adopting something like, I've got a strike through on that. And number 2, at the end of the first line, signs will be reviewed as part of an overall graphic system. And then we were talking about muted and tone and brightness, and I don't know if we ended up settled. But then,
Just like italicized, considered.
I mean, I like that it says will only be considered, meaning for, we have the obligation to consider it, but we have no obligation. And now hearing the back and forth about the, okay, we can, fill in a blank between limits. Yeah, I am in favor of the muted percentage right now, especially because we only have to consider it. It doesn't say eliminated signs will be allowed, they're muted, or may be permitted, they're muted. It may be considered. Okay, so we have an obligation to consider it. I'm okay with an obligation to consider. I think that's okay with the office board members.
We can consider will, and may, maybe. Feel like it.
So eliminated signs may be considered instead of will only be.
If they're muted.
So we go more vague there. I would take out the only. I would say may be considered. So external sign illumination has to be natural white.
And that would be the item where you might want to introduce something about on a case-by-case basis for restaurants and businesses open at night, Not
So you're gonna do that in this one and in the general fund policy. I like that. It gives guidance on what might be approved, what sorts of uses the signs might be approved for.
are generally not permitted for the only operation.
I can give you this.
Okay.
And will be considered on a case-by-case basis. For restaurants and businesses open at night.
And you do the same thing as your order policy? Question, and this again could be my lack of knowledge. So you say in 4 that external sign illumination is to be neutral white, but then the last sentence says color and illumination is discouraged, would they be considered? Is there a difference between external sign illumination?
Think back. Would be, a bulb directed at,
A light and shining.
yeah, like a
Got it, okay. So
sconce light or something. And then the color and illumination, at that last sentence is for internal, and could be if.
So that is my lack of knowledge, so that's
No,
what you were saying.
it takes an explanation though, it does. So like, that would be your standard. And lights on the inside, and there's some color to the box that forms the sign, right?
Just say color and internal illumination.
It says that the external, I think there's only two ways to illuminate sign, external and internal.
Yes.
Okay. External sign illumination is to be neutral white, period. Okay. Internal sign illumination can be colored on a case-by-case basis, is what this is saying, right? Color and illumination is discouraged. Maybe consider so.
Color and
I would just say color for internal sign illumination. Yes, if you want to use the discouraged, you can say, I guess discouraged it means much, but then it will be considered on a case-by-case basis.
Maybe.
Because that color and illumination is could be construed by kicking. Oh, well, if I argue enough, I can get my external light color. But I think that's just the absolute no, right?
External sign illumination is to be neutral white.
Period.
Color or internal
Illumination may be considered on the case-by-case basis.
may be.
Will
So there is a sentence in
Or you
between.
could say will be considered.
Yeah,
on
that
a
almost
case-by-case
seems like we
basis,
need
which is
another-
better language.
Another number for that next sentence that you're talking about.
Internal sign illumination, which identifies the dwelling will be allowed.
You need to have, if neon's still in the game, you just need to have a specific statement about neon, excluding it from these other categories.
No, it's just mixed in a little bit
But
of
it's
a.
intermingled, I think neon ought to be its own thing, because is it external illumination that's colored? Is it internal? I think neon ought to have its own, because it straddles all these lines, it needs to be its own thing.
There is a third category.
It's
Neon,
neon.
I mean, technically it's not.
Where the large board went through this exercise and they were good with, they were good with where it is now?
Yeah.
Neon.
Neon in our,
Over the general recommendation.
I mean, neon's discouraged. In
Well, I
our-
heard it, yeah, but, I mean, that, the people ask for it on a regular basis.
Neon is discouraged?
So somewhere.
It's on the King Street
It's on
policy.
King
right?
Street
It's
policy.
covered.
I have the computer open. Don't forget, we also have the neon now.
Yeah, we
It
do have
does.
some.
It does.
Which they used at Music Farm, right?
Yeah, it's the use of neon, the use of exposed neon is generally not permitted. With unexposed neon.
Oh.
Was that
Yeah, that new stuff
2007
at
also?
Music Farm, that push through thing we approved at Music Farm.
We approved that.
Like back when.
It was internally lit. I would think that would categorize as an
It's
internally
internally
lit.
lit. 'Cause
Sign.
it is internally lit.
It just doesn't have a color illumination. It's white.
And it is internally lit, because what they do is they just put a clear strip or something.
Yeah.
And then light the inside of the
That's
sign
right.
and it looks like.
That's right.
We need to add a paragraph about, well, it should, I mean, should you take the King Street, the use of exposed, or just the use of neon in general is generally not permitted? Put on a case by case
Unless it's
basis
really cool.
for businesses and
Yeah.
restaurants that are open at night.
Yeah, if people are gonna come in, well, what about that?
We've got some,
What about that?
neon signs downtown that are historic.
Yes. Yeah. You guys redo the neon on Basil? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will probably.
Allow the
There's
reservation.
a one on the side of, well, they're probably gonna tear down one, so. It's not gonna-
Right, so
Sorry.
neon is,
I think you take the King Street policy says the use of exposed neon, but I say just the use of neon is generally not permitted. And then, but, do we just leave it as generally not permitted? But that generally allows us the ability to, I would just say that, it's generally not permitted. But I wouldn't stop it right there.
I actually like
Yeah,
neon, but I understand.
But would it be,
I understand.
would it be considered on a case by case basis?
Well, I think when you say generally not permitted.
That just puts you at the advantage of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, if it's generally not permitted, we could say we don't. But if we would like something to say, it's generally not permitted, however, we have the ability.
Right. That's what we've approved, traditional neon. We've
Yeah,
approved
the
it.
stuff on,
The hot hands and the.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The Lenore.
Yeah.
Stars is the new song.
there's another caveat that will be faced with soon, in that, let's say we get something in place with the historic corridor. One block to the west of Morrison, there's some very large developments going up that we don't have any time to purview over. It's gonna be a little weird.
Oh, really?
So, you could cover on me, it's huge.
Oh, flashing. Here we go.
I mean, if we don't have, what I mean is, they're big buildings, so that it's like different caliber, unless they're really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
It appears as though we're rounding out the discussion. Okay, so we were on the general one, but I know that we're sort of discussing them together, but we'll make two separate motions. Okay, so which one have you been making you've been making edits to the historic corridor district?
That's a new one. That's the new one.
But that's the one that you've been really looking for the edits on.
That's the one I'd like to fix sooner than later.
So that's the one we just went through and you were writing the specifics. Well, for one thing, anything that is the same between these two, am I in agreement that the same edits, identical, should be? And maybe I should be a little more specific. In both of these, which are responsibilities to safeguard should be struck. Number two, in both of these, should in the first line should become will. Number four, that's Julia's proposed language. They're, signs are generally not permitted, but will be considered for businesses, yada, yada. Number four, in the historic corridor, that the second line, illuminated signs may be considered. And then Fillmore had edits,
Julia had the addition.
extensive edits to four. Did you get all the four in the historic corridor district?
With the historic corridor. Well, what I had
I'm sort of
was-
going in between those.
was
Internal.
I mean, I guess we're gonna leave the to write this, because I don't know what you substitute for that unless you get specific numbers.
And you changed it to maybe consider.
And, signs will only be considered, maybe considered their usual purpose.
And then color and
Remember,
internal.
with the size of zoning, external sign, illumination is to be neutral white, and then the other one was, illumination. Do you have anything, David?
Color and internal
Yeah,
illumination.
Yeah, illuminated signs will only be considered if they are new. Okay, that's is that internal or external illumination?
I think that's that's just in general.
That's just
That's
in
the
general,
general
okay.
statement,
And
it's
it says you
illuminated
can,
signs.
All illuminated signs.
So I would.
and then only internal sign illumination, which identifies the building, you could say, I mean, maybe it is allowed, I mean, it's gonna allow it to, if it identifies the building. And color in, internal may be considered from a case by case basis.
And then through the same language from number 4 in the general sign policy, which is on a case-by-case basis for businesses and restaurants, that are open at night. Do we want a separate paragraph in each that just says the use of neon is generally not permitted?
But maybe consider on a case by case basis, or you don't like that?
I just, it gives us,
Yeah, it gives you.
okay, it's generally not
Give it
permitted.
on its own.
And that way, if something really cool does come up, it's generally not permitted, but it's
Gonna be
not.
really
not. Right, okay.
And I think on this one, definitely number 5 on this one, signs should be attached to the building carefully to prevent damage. Signs must be attached to the building carefully to prevent damage. This sort of pattern.
So that's number 5 and
Say must.
Sounds good.
Well, is there a motion to defer these to incorporate comments, which we could have that motion?
Or just
Sure.
to,
We
adopt, approve with,
Oh, yeah, we can.
You could approve it with these amendments and then get back to the air out. Their next meeting is 3 weeks away, we're just 2 weeks away.
okay, so then.
There's this.
Unless we do unless I guess.
If it's gonna be
We have this
helpful, I mean,
special
we can
meeting.
approve it with our edits.
Do you feel like
It
it then
won't-
have to
it
go
won't
back to
be-
large?
We have to go back if we
Yeah.
make any changes. And that's what makes any policy, and North Carolina's coming your way, and it's, like, all of these policy statements are written when there was one board, and it's really tricky.
Well, at least if you were, I mean, maybe, I know that everybody's scheduled is very big, you haven't been able to get a special meeting, but at least if we did approve it tonight with our edit, if you were able to get that meeting, it would allow you to do so versus the deferral, which, then you can't even try to get the ARL together.
Do we need to get before?
Yes. So y'all are in 2 weeks, and L is in 3 weeks.
I make
So
a motion
normally you're on the
for-
same.
No,
week
it's
cycle,
because of
but
when,
it's unusual on that time when.
I'll make a motion for approval with amendments as discussed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
What did you vote for?
Doesn't have to be unanimous.
Y'all are pretty lax.
Oh, we got it.
Okay.
Okay, wait a minute, I do need to write
I
down the
wanna see
motion.
it.
This was a motion for approval of the revised bar sign policy general and the new bar sign policy statement, historic corridor district, with the edits proposed by the board.
The double.
It was a double
Motion.
motion.
Okay.
So, and the motion was made by Julia, it was seconded by Bill. And Fillmore, did you vote for it? Nay.
You want to
Yeah.
say it.
You want to see it back?
Oh, well, no, this way, if they make any edits, then it would come back.
No, no, I
Or
mean,
you just wanna see what we said.
I would like to see
Oh,
what we
In
can.
writing, yeah.
That's it.
The motion passes with 3 voting for and Fillmore voting against.
It's okay.
Although I am with Fillmore, if you can circulate, the revised one, because we may be able to go, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I'll
would
do it, and I'll make
Yeah.
it, I'll strike through and I'll make it really clear
Yeah.
what's,
And
what,
just email it.
I mean, we're down to
Right,
words.
right.
So it doesn't
Yeah.
need to be read through.
Frankie, were the minutes anywhere? Because recently I've just been saying, sure, I approve that, but I don't really see them. I'm not following. I don't think I said Did you see the minutes?
From the time.
Al,
Al,
interesting.